All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should be used at the listener's discretion. So we'll get to the important stuff first, which is, I feel like it's potentially a spoiler alert worthy opening, talking about True Detective. We're talking about the important stuff.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I told you we rewatched season 1 the other day.
Okay.
Much heavier of a supernatural influence in season 1 than I remembered.
Yeah.
So much so that like in the end of season 1, when they're in the temple thing, there's like the vortex of the other dimension spinning above Matthew McConaughey, right?
Yeah.
So then we watched episode 1 of season 4 last night. And then I went on YouTube and was like, oh, let's see some breakdowns of this thing.
Yeah.
The depth that people went into, drawing parallels between season 4 and season 1, half-hour videos.
Yeah.
Like this one guy, they went so far as to say like Rust lived in Alaska for a while. There's Lone Star beer in Alaska, which was what he was drinking in season 1. And his dad's name was Terry, who was...
Did Rust live in Alaska?
Yeah, between the time of leaving Louisiana and coming back, he did Alaska charter fishing. And he said that's when he was like, all there is to do is stay up at night, look at the stars kind of thing. Okay. And then they went into like Russ's dad's name and how that's a character in the same name as the character, the guy that was pointing the way. Travis. Yeah. That's Rust's dad's name. Okay. Or something like that. And then they tie in the circular pattern that the pictures were in compared to the season 1 stuff. And then they tie it in.
Because I think that comes up later. If you watch like scenes from the next, that is like a tattoo on one of the victims, like the woman who died a few years ago. Yeah. I think. And then I think it shows up on one of the new victims as well.
And then they tied to the things that Rust would say in the first season about like this person coming back and all that. Yeah. They then tied it to the Chulu mythical creature, like the octopus head thing that lives under the water, which is where everything's happening in Alaska. Like this whole big supernatural tie coming back in. So I'm not a huge fan of that. Yeah. I don't mind. I didn't mind the cult side of it, right? I didn't mind like the crazy person in the bunker. Yeah. All that dirty stuff. Once it starts to cross over into like Stranger Things territory, it gets a little tough to manage.
I agree. I hope that it stays on the human side of the supernatural and they're not conjuring up something.
But it seems like they are.
It does seem like they are. Yeah. And the few reviews that I read so far, I think mentioned that that's a possibility. But I'm hoping they don't go down that road and it just toes the line of being, this is, but really it's just some psycho at the end.
But also like that may have been why season 1 was so good, is because from what I remember, season 2 or 3 were way less of that, more like character study stuff, and the characters are kind of just fine.
2 is a tough one. I've told myself I need to go back and watch that one because season 1 was so good, and then season 2 was just so different, and not season 1 that I was like, I don't think I even finished it.
I didn't,
and I told myself I was going to go back and watch it, but I tell myself a lot of things that I don't follow up on. So
I didn't finish it, and I didn't watch season 3 at all.
Yeah,
I think I watched like one episode.
Was good. Yeah.
It was better.
Yeah, it got better.
Yeah, I've heard lackluster on 2 and 3. Yeah. But then watching 1 was like, it's just so much of Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey's acting too. Like they were so believable as those people.
Well, and some of the stuff they did in that too, some of the cinematography there's that one shootout in the neighborhood that is like a continuous non-cut, it's like a 7-minute straight, and just the choreography of that, once you know that that's the case, it's just super cool.
Well, I'm excited.
Definitely.
I'm not pumped.
What I don't love is having to wait.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was a nice natural break in the True Detective talk.
Yeah.
They had a True Detective by now. They wasn't sleeping.
Supernatural possessed.
Exactly it. Yeah. Did you check her for a circular tattoo on her back? More important business. Well, the other of important business and Nellie's, you said you had a very important thing you wanted to bring up, kind of a crucial talking point, which is another poop story.
It was the worst. This is going to take a little while to get out.
Okay.
So Sadie, we went to the Dells after New Year's, the week after New Year's. We were there for a couple of days, and we take her to a lady who watches her, and she's awesome. So she's out there. We came back. Like the day after we got back, Sadie threw up like 4 times. So this was on a Saturday. And on the 4th one, this is like midnight at this point, there's blood in it. And I'm like, ugh. So I checked our vet, and they don't open until 7. So now I got 7 on Monday, and this is Saturday night. So if it were like 7 more hours, I probably would have stayed home with her and just said, we're going to the vet first thing in the morning. But like I couldn't wait 36 hours, you know?
Right.
And so I have to take her to the ER, which, you know, and that one sucks.
Yep.
So we go up to the Dundee ER, and they were great. But x-rays, don't see anything. They give her some, you know, IV fluids and like 5 different anti-vomiting medications and like a pain med, and sent us home. So this is during the first wet snowfall too. So 12:45 in the morning, driving her up to Dundee in that snow.
Yeah.
$1,100.
Dog has no job still.
Dog definitely not a contributor to the household. I take that back. She was a contributor to the household. So we come back. So Sunday she's fine. Monday she's mostly fine, but I'm like, you know what? She hasn't had a bowel movement since she's been back. And so then we're outside, and she takes dump, and then the backside of it is just a lot. And I'm like, oh, great. So all of Monday night, I slept on the couch, and every 2 hours she would whine, and I'd have to run her outside to do diarrhea now at this point. And so then Tuesday morning, I got to take Sid to school. By the time I get back, whole kitchen, diarrhea going up the stairs, diarrhea across like our hall
ceiling.
Upstairs.
You're pointing to the ceiling.
Yeah, basically across the ceiling. It should have been, probably. So now I'm home with a screaming infant, poo everywhere, a sick dog that I don't want to do more poo, scrubbing, carpet shampooing. It was like a 6-hour fiasco. And obviously the job's not good enough by the time Taylor gets home, but it was enough. And so that was that lasted through. And of course they give you, you know, the $70 food. And then we're back up there. They're like, oh, well, here's the anti-diarrhea medicine. I'm like, if you knew her stomach was upset, why don't you just give me both medicines? Yeah. You know, I was up there. So like, don't give me 4 puke medicines and 0 diarrheas.
Gotta go somewhere.
Like, oh, I guess, you know, and I'm like, could any of these medicines make her diarrhea? And they're like, no, but we'll give you some anti-diarrhea stuff. I'm like,
God, guys.
When we didn't see anything on the x-rays and we thought her stomach was going to be upset, maybe the diarrhea medicine comes at that time.
If she can't throw up,
yeah,
it's going out the other end.
Yeah. So that was, just another saga of the
that's good
dog. So the funny thing that we do is, which is really funny to other people, not us, is that usually a week before an event like this, we go, hey, what do you think about pet insurance? And then we decide like, nah, we're not going to do it. Yeah. And then like within 2 weeks, it's like, there's $1,000 charge that we could have had some pet insurance for.
Dude, we carried the pet insurance for Lily, the puggle. We used it more because she was such a mutant dog.
Yeah.
I remember when she had like the cherry eye, like her eye exploded.
Yeah.
And just the whole thing of her, like we were in that vet, and then Mia bit her a few times. Like, dude, we were in there frequently. We overran our copay or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, it's all free from here on out." I'm like, "Okay, cool." Yeah, we hit our maximum with her like every year.
Yeah. So I know West Coast, they pet insurance is a benefit that you can get, and
through your job.
Okay. And bereavement for your pet.
I was pretty sad.
3 days worth of bereavement.
I got sad. I got extremely sad.
So start raising chickens, and every time you knock one off, you're like, 3 more days. You know?
But I'm so full.
Turn that thing in for $6 so you get some more eggs.
Pretty good. Yeah. What's the insurance policy on a meat bird? Well, good, man. I'm just happy to see that your poop continues. Your poop side continues. I mean, we've been through
just a lot of poop and stuff. Babies pooping.
Yeah. I mean, we've had pink eye twice now in the house. Nathan twice.
Yeah.
First time they gave us a like a Neosporin type of ointment to put in his eye, and he was relatively a year and a half old.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't get near this kid's face with a fork with food on it. How am I going to get a Neosporin in his eye?
Yeah.
And I just traumatized the ever living crap out of him. Like on the direction says, do not sit on your child to administer this, like, because they just know, like.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you give us anything else? They're like, well, and with his age, it really is the most effective. It's sticky. It'll stay in there. Yeah. You know, I'm like, it's never getting in. We had to like trick him. I'm like, oh, I'm going to take this. We had to put it on a Q-tip. Be like, I'm going to clean your eye. And then you smear it on there. And by that time, he knows that you BS'd him. So it's all over, you know. Second time was drops. It was better. But we had that. We had hand, foot, and mouth. We had, I mean.
Any eye stuff for me, like even right now, my eyes are starting to like water a little bit.
So let me tell you this story. I just told this yesterday. When I was on ambulance 1, we had a girl who was not living in sanitary conditions. She got pink eye. And so she didn't get it treated. So it was irritating her, started scratching it. She gave herself a corneal abrasion, turned into red eye. This is just what the doctor surmised happened after we brought her in. Because when we brought her in, she called because her eye exploded. Because she was scratching it and it went bloop, and this little red gummy worm shot out the center of her eye. So we get there and she looks like a zombie victim. Like she's running out with her hands covering her face, just dirty, stumbling everywhere because she can't see. And we're like, what is going on? We almost had to like trip her and put her down, you know? So we get her in the ambulance. We like lead her to the ambulance, like herd her over there. And we get in and we're like, what are you talking about with your eye? Because all we got was the eye injury. And she takes her hand away and she's got blood all over her palm. And there's, just this little like red hot type of thing poking out, just kind of drooping down onto her cheek, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, is that your eye? And we couldn't tell if it was the muscle in her eyelid or where it was, you know? So we did all the goofy textbook stuff of like got the cups and wrapped her up like a house fly, you know, like wrapped around her face, which the doctor was very impressed about. He's like, oh, I've only seen that in a book. And I'm like, what's going to happen? He's like, what are you going to do? Put stitches in it? She's like, she's losing the eye.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, dude.
Why did we waste this cup?
Yeah. He's like, rinse that out, man. Put it back. So he's like, I'll call the surgeon. He's like, but I can't imagine that she's keeping this eye all because of untreated pink eye and just rubbing it and scratching it till your eye wore so thin that your pupil exploded and the guts came out of your eye. Dude. Is one of the many East Side stories, dude. That's why I like the East Side.
Yeah.
So with that, I sent you the card of like, hey, what was it like? Hiring academy probationary year tips and tricks and stuff like that, right? What came to mind? I wrote down some stuff.
Yeah. You know, it started to come to mind and then I realized I'm so out of date with some of the practices of that stuff that I'm thinking back to like what I did, but I'm like, I wonder if people even do that anymore.
They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, like, you know, when I was trying to get hired, basically I started out by figuring out a radius of how far I was willing to drive. And I basically called every city hall in that radius and asked about when they were testing. I'm sure that you can find that on cities' websites now. Yeah. But either way, I had a list of like when hiring processes were happening. I would say now, you know, I'm mostly familiar with the 24/48 schedule, but I would say like if you're listening from somewhere else, like, you know, there's 48/96s and stuff like that going out there. And so I would say if there's like definite deal breakers for you, you kind of educate yourself on what those are.
Yeah.
And so like if you're someone with small kids, like I probably wouldn't want to start a 48/96. I don't know that I'd want to be away from my kids for that long. So that would probably be a deal breaker for me of like, I'm not even going to apply at that place. But it's just coming up with a list of places and getting as much exposure to as many different testing processes as you can.
Yeah. And
that was kind of what I had told people, or even up until this date for what I did for hiring.
I think that still applies. Definitely the as many processes as you can thing applies.
Yeah.
What I have written down, what I tell everybody, all like the explorers that come through, we see all the people are like, oh, I want to be a firefighter. I always tell them, figure out where in the country you want to live first.
Sure.
And then see if their fire job exists there.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't exist there, but you really want to live there, then pick a new job. Because it's not going to be worth, you're going to be there for presumably 25 to 35 years now. if you settle for someplace, you're like, I don't really love working here, but I want to be a firefighter. That after the first 5 or 6 years, you're in that period of like lull, like 7 to 12 mark.
Yep.
And you're like, I want to get out of here. I really want to live on the beach, but I settled.
And I thought about that too. And my thought also was that I think if you want to work for a city department, you should check to see what their residency requirements are, because a lot of them you have to live there before you can even apply. Like, and I could be wrong on this, but I think like Boston, you had to live in the city limits for a year before you could apply.
Really?
Yeah. So I would just make sure of like,
Holy
if
cow.
I'm like, I'm going to test for big city departments, that you know that you might have to live at one of those places for a period of time before you can actually, and if you've taken EMT class or something like that, make sure your stuff transfers over, because I know like each state, they have different things that they call. So just, make sure that whatever education you have transfers over.
I think that goes the other way too, not with the education stuff, but living. We've seen a couple of people move west and they're like, I want to work for San Diego or Colorado, somewhere in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
And they end up having to live like 2 hours away from where they work because they can't afford the cost of living there. So you might think like, I'm going to go work in San Diego.
Right.
It's like, but I got to live in the desert.
Yeah. Stuff too that wasn't, I don't know if it was available at the time. I never got into it, but if a place that you want to work has a Explorer program or like a part-time program or something like that, and that's your place that you want to go, then definitely get involved with that. Because like for Elgin, you get preference points for it. I don't know how it works on like combination departments where they have part-timers and full-timers. If working there part-time gets you preference points, at some point, or if,
at least informally it does, right? Yeah. Like if there's a board of trustees or something like that, they'll recognize that you did work there.
So I would say like if you're super narrow focused on the places that you want to go and they do have like something that isn't full-time, I would get involved in that as soon as I could. What
do you think about, so the advice that I was given, and I took it, was don't pass up a job.
Yes,
like if you get a job and you get offered a job, don't pass it up. And then what goes hand in hand with that is don't fall into the trap of thinking like this is just my starter department or this is just a beginning department. I'm going to get out of here eventually.
Yeah.
Because I worked for a very small department, much closer to the city, and it was like 30 guys, and it was awesome. Like the guys there were incredible.
Yeah.
The structure of the department and the kind of way they ran was a little bit janky, but it's because of what it was. But if I had gone in there and be like, I'm just slumming it with you idiots for 3 months before Elgin calls me,
right,
or before my big city calls me, that's just, you're not doing anybody any favors. Because I actually had a lot of debating leaving that department. Like I knew I wanted to work for a larger department, not like a city, like a proper city. Because I worked part-time in a smaller one. And I was like, I had done the small-time thing. I want to see what a larger department's like. And then I got there and I was like, I could definitely stay here. This is a really cool department with really cool guys in it. But yeah, if you consider like, placeholder, you're just cheating yourself, because you might actually dig it a lot and you're not going to have any regrets. We have a lot of smaller suburbs around us and those guys love it. And they may or may not like working for our department our size, you know, but it doesn't mean that it's less valuable. The people there probably need your EMS just as much as the people in the 140,000 person city do, right? So that's one major mind trap to not fall into, is just consider something like a pretend or a starter department as a stepping stone thing. That's not fair.
And I definitely wouldn't play that game depending on where you're at on lists too, because you're not always guaranteed to get the call, and so there were a couple lists that I was on that I was higher ranked, and I could have fallen into the trap of being like, well, this place will call, and those places never called. And so it just all depends on the hiring cycle that they're in, and so definitely don't pass up a full-time job thinking that another one's calling in a couple of months,
What about, do you remember when you went in to do your panel interview or anything like that? Do you remember any of those things? The next part of this I wrote down, one of just the few things I wrote down was concerning that. And it's like, show up and be prepared and show that you've taken an interest in the city or the municipality that you're auditioning for, basically, right? And the more you can show an interest in that you actually want to serve that community specifically, the better,
Yeah, and you hit it on professional too. Like I think more and more the service is turning into, professional, really, really from the inside turning into a professional organization. And so like showing up dressed well and, don't dress down for it. Like be act professional, because that's what they're looking for, is professionals at this point.
Well, and I think it's the last point I wrote down on that one is know your audience. And I wrote down generationally, know your audience.
Yeah.
So like if you walk in there as a 20 to 25-year-old person, you have to understand that you're talking to people near their 60s potentially, right? So you can't walk in as if you're going to talk to your friends or even anybody 10 years older than you. And so, yeah, you might not own a suit or like you might not own a tie,
right?
But it might be worth an investment because you know the people that are going to be talking to you might value that. So know your audience and know who you're talking to.
Right.
And
I would also, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, funny enough, like know who people are as much as you can.
Yeah.
One of our new hires is just like, he said he was saying, oh yeah, I know the chief has done this and I look for, I've seen the progression that you guys have made in the past couple of years and blah, 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 with the chief sitting at the table and he didn't recognize him. Yeah. And so he's like, what would you say to the chief if you saw him? He's like, oh, right. And he wasn't playing him. He wasn't like baiting him into anything, but it was just funny to like afterwards I saw that he was wearing his dress shirt and it said his name embroidered on it. He's like, crap. Like, I hope I didn't say anything stupid, because it's 6 people in a room and he might be 15 feet away from you and your head's spinning and you're trying just not to black out and give the right answer. Right. Yeah. So you're not reading name tags.
Kind of touching on what you said too about taking interest in the places. Also, I got the advice to let them know that you're interested like in living or like raising your family in the area, because they're looking for stability, and so if you can, everyone goes in and says, I want to help people when they say like, why do you want this job? Like they hear that all the time. So like differentiate a little bit. And if you can show that you have an interest in the community and some stability and possibly raising a family there, that's what they're looking for, is stability. And that gives you a little differentiation from, hey, I just want to help people. You know?
That's a very good one. And I think that, I definitely think that can lead into a conversation about like residency and stuff. But I think that's something that a lot of people not miss, but I think it's gotten lost, that like this job is a service industry job that you're serving this particular community in. And I've heard people say like, when they're asked about like, are you going to get promoted? Do you want to go for promotion or do you want to do this position or that? They'll be like, well, not here. I don't want to get promoted here. It's like, well, where are you going to get promoted? Like this is the community, literally the community you chose to serve.
Right.
Why is it so off-putting for you to progress in this department or be interested in it, And that alone, I mean, those people have numerous other problems that will weed them out or put them in a category all their own. But yeah, if you look at the community you're about to serve and you have like disdain for them or an aversion to them for whatever reason, I would not work there, because that's what you're there to do, is interact with the people that might put you off. You're there to be nice to them and interact with them more times than you probably want to. Yeah. And, so yeah, recognizing the community you're trying out for is a major part of that, right? It's not all the glamorous. You have to talk to people once in a while. Right. You can't hide behind the badge all the time and roll your windows up in the engine. Yeah. Just not talk to the neighborhood you're in. And then some of the other guys, like I was talking to a guy in a larger department south of us, and he takes the opposite approach, where he's a runner, and he would in the summer he would go to work just like an hour early, and he would run his district. He's like, because I want to see like. Yeah, I want people to see me. I'm not just a person making X amount of dollars and leaving, driving an hour away to where I live. Like I want to be in the community and like know the neighborhood and know the people. And I'm like, it's honorable. It's something that I ride my bike to work as much as I can. Yeah. But I'm not interacting with people. Like I might see the same handful of guys getting ready to go to work every morning. I ride, but that's just another level of like caring.
When I did ride my bike, mine was more street study though. It was just, I would take different routes home just to see which streets were where and everything. But
just a different way to slice it, right? Let's just jump forward then, man, into your probationary year.
Skipping the academy.
Go ahead.
I don't know, the academy to me is just I don't know, no, just be quiet in the academy. Like you don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons in there, and most of the time it's attitude and mouth that get. People realize that when you come to the academy, there's a chance you have no experience at all, and that's what the academy is for, is to learn the basics skills. You're not expected after an 8-week academy to be a professional firefighter. You're expected to be able to like carry some stuff and know how to use a couple of the tools, and then that's the start. And but I think the biggest issue is if you can go in and just keep your mouth shut. and lead by example if you have those skills versus talking to compensate for your lack of skill or your lack of desire to work, because that stuff is found pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm starting to view academies more and more as just a place that you're going to get through it unless something catastrophic happens. And more I view it less as a pass and fail and more of, at the end of it, they give a recommendation to the department. It's almost like a psych test.
Yeah.
We're not going to tell you that you should or should not hire them. We're going to tell you what they did in the time we had with them.
Right.
So I think I don't know if that's just a change in the structure and function of it, or if it's always been that. And I always just thought it was more of a stringent thing where you might not pass and then you'd be out of a job. Maybe I just had that opinion of it and it wasn't, but more and more it's just like a longer evaluation basically of your personality. And then it seems like they just give a recommendation of like, they're not very good.
Right.
We wouldn't hire them, but they're your problem kind of thing. Like that's what it seems like to come back to us a few times. And
that seems what it's like now. We use an outside agency. Like when I went through and you went through, you had IRFA, right? Yeah. So it's like we had our own IRFA, which was a lot harder because those were your peers, future peers who were running the academy. Yeah. So like you couldn't be, a bag of milk in that. I mean, you could. Yeah. Actually, I remember like guy in my academy getting yelled at, venting a roof, but he's like, hit it flounder, and then he's like, you need to hit a treadmill. A guy defeated on a roof simulator. He doesn't work with us anymore, obviously. Awesome. But
see you at lunch.
Yep, pretty much. Dude, the first day we went, I was at Station 1, and he was at Station 5, and I didn't know anything. And we drove down to Station 5, and this is middle of the afternoon. And I worked for a captain at the time. And we walked in, and he's wheels up in the recliner with like a quarter of a watermelon eating it. And I'm like, I know nothing about the fire service, but this is probably not what you're supposed to be doing right now. Yeah. And that guy didn't make it through probation. But
I really didn't give too much thought to the academy, to be honest with you, when I was kind of mapping this thing out. Because I think it's just that they're not. I just have a different view of it. Yeah, I think it falls much more in the department now than less in the academy. The academy standard is just to make sure you know how to put your pants on, and you're not even. I mean, I guess you are using your equipment, so learn your pack and salute the flag. I don't know,
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's a bunch of boxes that need to get checked for whatever certifications you get coming out of there. Yeah. So if that's the best way, the most efficient way to get someone through that, to me, that's kind of what it is now. So that they can be a employable firefighter for us at that point.
All right. Well, let's skip off it then.
Copy.
To probation.
Yeah.
The first thing I wrote down here for probation is first show your work and then show your personality. Mm-hmm. And this is something that became more evident to me since being promoted. Of like, if I walk into a station with a probationary person who I don't have any experience with, and the first thing people tell me is like, oh, dude, he's hilarious. Or like, he's a great guy. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm glad, but I don't care. Yeah. Like, give me something more than that to ease my mind in the next half hour before we get a call, please. Yeah. I'd much rather, even if you're the funniest guy, the most charismatic person, you have relationships with people on the job first, I'd much rather just see you work really hard for the first little bit. And then at lunchtime, we'll make jokes. We'll get to know you more, something like that. But if you're just a comedy routine and then the basic stuff isn't done right, like that's a huge issue. Mm-hmm. So even if you're a funny person, even if you know people there, now this gets frustrating too. When I was on days at a different department I got hired at, they didn't have really a structure for it. So my task for the day is like 3 weeks of days. And by the second week, they're like, well, take this notebook and go on the bay floor and just draw the compartments and memorize them. And by that time, I'd seen each shift 3 or 4 or 5 times, you know. So they're like, I'll come in and have breakfast with us and blah, blah. I started to make kind of friends with people. Mm-hmm. So I would go into the kitchen, and then depending on what captain or what battalion chief was there, like, nope, you're back on the floor. Like, get out there and draw pictures, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. So you just go out there and draw pictures. Like, that's not the time to make jokes or try to be friends with that captain or battalion chief. It's like, okay, I'm going to show you that I can be diligent in this task you gave me, and maybe that'll buy me a little bit of fun time later. Right. And over the course of that time, they do loosen up, and then guys start to trust you more. But if you're standing there trying to be Mr. Clownface in front of the captain who's telling you to do a task, it doesn't go very far, right? What would be one of your top ones first day, or like, hey, your first shift is next shift, what are you telling guys?
I usually tell our new guys to find out what the expectations are from whoever their officer is right away. Yeah. And I said, that's going to be different from each person that you have as your officer, but at least you're showing interest to absorb versus like, you don't need to show us what you know, because we can find that out pretty easily.
Yeah.
Just show us that you're willing to absorb and do the work, because that's basically what we're looking for out of you. And that could be I'll let you know on every call that we go to, or that could be unfortunately a 45-minute, here's what we're going to do in each of these calls,
right,
type thing. But you know what? That's, at least you've shown that officer the respect of like, you're interested in what they want from you out of the day. Yeah. And that changes every day. And I tell you, we have 7 stations. I'm like, you might get into a good routine with your crew at your station, but when you go out, you need to, that's day one again. Like the whiteboard gets erased, because most of the time your crew isn't calling ahead and being like, okay, here's all the things to know about, so-and-so, so that the next crew's ready for you. It's like, maybe the officer read a few DORs, maybe, but there's another chance that it could be an overtime officer who's just there to fill in for that day. And, so if you start out each day with like, hey, what are your expectations for the day? They let them take it. And then at least you've put yourself in the absorbing phase versus, the opposite.
Yeah.
And then just get ready to carry stuff, like we're not expecting you to be the best firefighter right out the chute. Like, we need you to figure out what stuff you're going to need to carry the most and carry it. The first in bag, the hand can, whatever your first in stuff is for AFAs, like, know what that is and just get good at going to that stuff right away, and
I mean, it's extremely fundamental, but probably the most true advice.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have plenty of time of throwing ladders, like plenty of time of pulling hoses and stuff like that. So like the basics that you're going to use on a daily, like figure out what that stuff is and be ready to do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Drilling the compartments is something we still do a pretty good job of, with making sure the guys know where stuff is.
And you should, because if we go into a place and I need something, I'm not going back to get it. So you're hoofing it back. Yeah. And this actually happened to me. So I didn't know what a window punch was. I didn't know that was the term. And I don't know what I thought the term was, but we had a dead guy in a car, and my captain said, go get the window punch. I think I called it a center punch or something like that. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to go run around the engine and open up the compartment until I see something that looks like a window punch. And of course, like, the driver comes up, he's like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to find the window punch. And he's like, it's right here. I'm like, oh, this is not a window punch. This is, and it's like, that's not the time to have that argument. But I probably should know my compartments better at that point in time. And guess who knew his compartments a little better after that?
That's one of the fabled stories from one of the guys we let go on probation. Was I was in the depths of my lieutenant studying for the first test. And I was in like the weeds of it, dude, of like, what's the temperature difference between the gray area of a piece of charcoal and the black area? Mm-hmm. Which one is 600, which one is 800 degrees? Yeah. And I'm like memorizing this stuff. And I was like, I'm going to go see how this probationary guy's doing. Just give him a little leg grilling. And I went out there. I was like, get the K tool. And he's like, just the tool, right? And I was like, oh, come on, man. I'm like, yeah, okay. Just grab
you're
whatever.
In front of me, so go get the K tool.
grab whatever. Yeah. You're big, but so he comes back with the whole leather pouch, and I said, okay, tell me what's inside this pouch. And he's like, this is the Allen knife, and this is the shove key. I'm like, go get something else. I'm like, okay, go grab our struts. I said, what size struts do we have? This is not when we had our Paratech ones. And he holds one up to his leg, and he goes, about 3 feet. I said, okay, I got to go. And I went back into his lieutenant. I'm like, this guy's going to get fired. I'm like, this guy's going to get fired immediately. And it was just so infuriating. He was like 6 months on at that point. I was like, I just want to beat you with the strut right now as I'm studying like a madman. And you're telling me something's a shove key and an Allen knife. I'm like, God, fuck. So, yes, a lot of diligence goes the same way, and extend that out further. Like, I've had talks with like Joe Galley, and extremely observant person. He knows the difference. He knows what his compartments sound like Whereas if you're a new guy on the floor
mm-hmm.
and he hears a compartment roll up and roll down, he's like, that wasn't enough time looking in that one.
Yeah.
He's like, it might be enough time for so-and-so to look at it. He's like, not for you, pal. Yeah. I'd be like, so I'll send you back out and be like, spend another 10 seconds on those compartments, would you? And and go for it. So it's, people notice that stuff.
Joe's right? Probably like, you loiter enough in here, loiter in front of the compartments.
Loiter. Oh, God. Yeah, that was an unfortunate phase. He's much better now.
Yeah.
What I can't remember what else I wrote in this thing now. Oh, so in our department, the new guy is fourth. So we run 3-man engines. New guy's fourth for 5 shifts. Then they get put third, right?
Yep.
The new guy and the lieutenant work hand in hand with their probationary book, giant binder thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I've been trying to tell guys for the past few years now is, yes, your daddy is the lieutenant. Like, that's your point of contact. That's who's going to run your book.
Right.
That does not mean that you eliminate the rest of the chain of command inside your station.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, your lieutenant will sign off for the day, but you got to talk to the next senior person you first.
Mm-hmm.
And be like, can you help me with this stuff? Or what can I do today? Or can you show me where this is? Because once you get off probation, if you start going to lieutenant for everything, that's not the relationship that's supposed to be there. Right. And not to sound like superior or anything like that in terms of like exclusive,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't want, like, there's far more capable people than me below me in those positions of that technical ability.
Right.
Go to them and get your problem solved. Don't come to me and I have to go to talk to them. Like,
right.
And that just builds trust between a new guy and you too, of like, can you show me your engine?
Yeah.
Instead of going to me and like, can you look over the engine? I'd be like, yeah, go get Curt.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is like the blue shirts are going to carry or sink someone more than the lieutenant, because the lieutenant you don't want to be a lieutenant with a probationary firefighter who's not going to make it. Regardless of that probationary firefighter's aptitude, you still are related to that. Mm-hmm. Blue shirts are not. So like, they don't care. That's a burden to them that now they're done with. And so, yeah, 100%, I would try and get the blue shirts as involved with you as unannoyingly as possible. But,
But it's one of those things too. It takes a good crew to do that,
mm-hmm.
right? Because there are people that will just pass it off and go talk to the lieutenant and see what he wants to do today.
Yep.
But yeah, there's something that we used to set at Station 1 of like, if you have a problem or even a question and it gets to me, that means it's gone through these 3 people first.
Right.
So if you haven't addressed it with those 3 people, it should not be in my office yet. Mm-hmm. And again, that sounds kind of dickish, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, I also think that if you don't do that, you're skipping over the knowledge you probably need that we're going to go do anyways.
Yep.
And like you said, after your first year, I probably won't be your lieutenant anymore with that person. Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden you get transferred to your shift now and he's never talked to you, even though he's worked in the same station as you for a year, mm-hmm. you'll be like, I don't know this guy. Right. Like, oh, you want my help now? Like, there's a very real potential to get catty with that kind of thing, right?
For sure.
Why don't you share your, we're at like 40 minutes now. Share your forcible entry metaphor for probation. We'll kind of wrap on that, and I think that's a good one to end on.
My thing is that when you get the job, you've just gapped the door. You have not forced it all the way open, and so the rest of your probationary period is you're actually forcing the door open and controlling it at that point. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people get out of the academy and get to shift and like, I made it, and it's like, you didn't. You barely gapped the door a little bit here. You've got a full year of busting that thing open.
Yeah.
So yes, that's always the analogy I give them in their 80-hour program is like, there's still a lot of work to be done. Like you just got in barely now. Yeah.
And I assimilated to when I was playing hockey, and one of the scariest times when I was playing juniors was when camp was over and tryouts were over, and then they posted the list of who made it. And I was like, well, that was fun. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you made the team. I was like, uh-oh. Can I not? Like, I really didn't think I was going to.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting in that locker room and it's like, okay, now I have to actually like perform. Like now the work starts. And that was far scarier than going to camp and getting invites to camps and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh crap. Like now I got to prove I belong in this stall, in this locker room next to these guys who are like 2-year all-stars. Mm-hmm. Like, uh-oh. And, so yeah, that's when you get onto probation out of the academy, you've simply made the roster for the start of the season.
Yep.
And anything can happen in that season. You're not guaranteed to be on that championship team or be on the roster at the end of the season, So I try to kind of draw that parallel too of like, now you made it to the locker room.
Yep.
You kind of have a nameplate above your stall.
Right.
And maybe not even above your gear locker. So
it's not
chill
like a
out.
nice one. It's just written in paper.
Yeah. You can rip it off very
Label
quickly.
maker.
All right, dude. Well, that was pretty good. Covered some ground. Got about a 30-minute nap in.
We did.
Not bad. Covered some True Detective, some poop stories, and pretty much planned out someone's first year and a half of employment.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad. What else
I don't know what else can be expected of us.
Not bad for a couple coffees. All right.
Probably be able to brainstorm more now that we'll be on the same.
I think we're going to have a lot more.
Yeah.
We'll be doing a lot more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude. These episodes are way...
We'd probably get some good shift workouts to send out to people. I felt like whenever we, for our small stint at Station 4 together, we ended up putting some pretty good workouts together.
Yeah. So. You start to realize how simple it can be and how effective that is, you know, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I did 3 things for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Yep.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yep.
All right. Well, give the normal disclaimer here. I, again, didn't mention my affiliates, Rescue One CBD and the Fourth Frontier heart rate monitoring strap. Also the Buy Me Coffee button. And keeping a 4-shifter, be more capable and durable with on the job and away from it. That's how I usually end it.
Well done.
I had to think of it all. I didn't give a good intro. We kind of jumped into True Detective stuff.
We did.
Whatever. People skip the first 2 minutes anyways, just assuming there's ads and stuff like that. Wait, this one's recording over here.